Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. As a Michigan fan myself, this is one of my favorite episodes to do every single year, where you kind of roll into the summer months and say, hey, who are the top targets, the must get guys for Michigan in the 2026 cycle? And I think it's worth noting that this episode for us Michigan fans coming out a little bit later than we are used to. I think it's been kind of difficult to get a sense of, hey, who are the names in this 2026 cycle that Michigan really prioritizes? Under Jim Harbaugh, you kind of got a feel of, hey, who are the names way back in the spring? Sherrone Moore's been a little bit more aggressive with how much talent's been on campus. You kind of had to pick through all the visitors, kind of figured out, hey, who's going to be coming in and taking official visits to get a sense of the names that Michigan really wants to go after. Now, before we get nitty gritty in terms of the players we want to see Michigan go out and land, I want to start with this, and that is what's Michigan's strategy on the recruiting trail? And what I'll say is that they're taking their time and making sure they're getting it right. And what I mean by that is you're seeing a lot of other programs get into those big boy conversations earlier on in the process. And as a result, have probably some more commitments going into the summer months than Michigan. What I think you're seeing from Michigan is, hey, what's different from recruiting 5 years ago versus right now is you are pouring, significant financial resources into these guys at the high school ranks. You want to make sure your evaluations are right on these players. And so I don't think Michigan was in any rush to get guys committed in the winter and spring months because they want to make sure that the guys we're going to be aggressively going after are guys that we want to come and join our program. And so I think towards the end of the summer and as you roll into the fall, that's when you see some of the fireworks for this Michigan 2026 cycle take place. And I think the other thing is Michigan's going to make sure they get the relationships right first. So then when you're having those big boy conversations or you're starting to talk some numbers, and I don't want to get too much into it, but that's you guys kind of get the sense of what I'm getting at. Hey, we're only talking numbers now. The relationships are set between this program, between the coaches and players. And so when you go in to talk numbers, it's easier to close out on these recruitments. We saw Michigan do that in the 2025 cycle as well. I don't think it was a coincidence that all the commitments started to pile up in the back half of the cycle. Talk about a guy like Bryce Underwood. Talk about a guy like Andrew Babaloa. Talk about a guy like Ty Haywood. I think you're going to see a similar approach. I think you're seeing a similar approach from Michigan in the 2026 cycle as well. Without further ado, let's get into the nitty gritty. Before we get into it, as always, the Michigan fans, part of the best thing about doing this in the summer months, and if you're a Michigan fan watching this episode, like one, you live and breathe this program, else you wouldn't be watching this episode. But number two, chances are you're pretty plugged in to what's going on with the recruiting trail. And chances are you probably got a player or two that you would like to see Michigan really go out and get in the 2026 cycle. Please let it fly in the comment section. We will add names to the board. We'll take off names to the board as we continue to kind of work through this process. This is a very, very fluid 2026 outline, if you will. There's going to be changes to it. And I think it's fun because we all get to put on our general manager hat and say, hey, who are the guys we want to see Michigan go out, push their chips in for, and go out and land? Let it fly in the comment section. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, what do you notice right off the bat? Michigan's going to prioritize the trenches. And that's for a couple of different reasons. Number one, hey, our head coach is Sherrone Moore. Right? Sherrone Moore wants to win football games by dominating the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. But number two, and I think a really important conversation to have is if you want to have elite line of scrimmage play, you cannot rely on the transfer portal to go out and make that happen. You ain't going to find a Kenneth Grant. You ain't going to find a Mason Graham sitting there in the transfer portal. Look, you can go out and get some guys like Trey Williams or go get a guy like Damon Payne who can help provide depth and quality depth to your roster, but you ain't going to find the difference makers, the high-level difference makers that are going to allow you to win national championships, especially on the offensive line. I mean, we saw Michigan try to go out and add some offensive linemen in the portal, but I think one of the things that the sticking points was they were all really, really expensive. And number two, I don't know how many guys in the portal were head and shoulders better than a guy like Evan Link or a guy like Andrew Sprague. In fact, I don't think there were that many that were. And so you're going to see Michigan make sure you fill it up along the lines of scrimmage, and that might be a good place to start. The offensive line class, you have one locked in Bear McWhorter, who I think is just a blue chip dude. And I know he might not be a 4-star prospect according to the recruiting services, but I look at him and say he'll probably be a multi-year starter somewhere down the road. Then you have some high-level guys. Felix Ojo, one of my personal favorite tackles in this class. I think Michigan would probably have some ground to make up. But then I look at Malachi Lee and Kelvin Abbott. Like, those are two real blue-chip tackles that have legitimate left tackle ability in the Big Ten. And I think Michigan's probably in a good spot for both of those guys. John Turrentine down from Texas, I think that's going to be a hard pull from Texas, but we saw Michigan do that with Ty Haywood. And then Leo Delaney, who unfortunately sounds like he might be trending to Clemson. And look for a commitment over the next couple of days. And if that commitment does not take place and Michigan gets him on campus, maybe Leo Delaney's back in play for Michigan. I think if we're Michigan fans here, hey, Malachi Lee, Calvin Abbott, maybe a guy like John Turrentine, you land those 4 guys to go along with Bear McWhorter, feeling damn good about your offensive line class. Defensive line. The guy I want to highlight here is Deuce Gerald's. He's going to come in on like a special visit for Michigan midweek. He has an official visit schedule, and he's coming in the middle of the week. He'll be the only guy on campus, and I freaking love this guy. And he's 6'2", 275 pounds, has the frame to get up to around 290 or maybe even 300, but he's very strong at the point of attack, but he's a tremendous athlete. Super twitchy, although undersized, super twitchy guy. Kind of reminds you a little bit of Chris Jenkins. Like, Chris Jenkins did not win because he was this massive defensive lineman. He won because he was really good off the line of scrimmage, and that athleticism gave a lot of interior offensive linemen some problems. Deuce Gerald, probably my number one guy for Michigan on the defensive line. Titan Davis, a good option. Ben Boulware is a guy that I think is trending to Michigan, more of that bigger body nose feel. Out in the edge room, Carter Meadows. I think the second conversation I want to get into, instead of going through top to bottom, is, all right, who are the 5 guys that we think Michigan might invest significant resources to go out and land? I think number 1 has to be Savion Hitter, 5-star running back from the state of Virginia. Everything you hear coming out of this recruitment is that Michigan will, for lack of better terms, not get outbid for him. They've put a ton of energy in terms of recruiting him from a relationship basis, and for good reason. This is a running back that checks all the boxes. He's an 11-second 100-meter guy. He's 5'11". He's 200 pounds. I don't even think the long speed's my favorite part about him. Like, he can burn. He has that breakaway speed. His ability to make people miss and his ability to have tremendous contact balance, it's hard to find running backs that check all the boxes. And I think Michigan fans know that from the 2024 year, where, you had a guy like Khalil Mullings and you had a guy like Donovan Edwards, but neither of those running backs did it all. Khalil Mullings was a battering ram, really, really good between the tackles, taking on contact, but didn't really have that juice at the second level. And then Donovan Edwards was the kind of the opposite. A guy that was really good at the second level, had some next level burst, really struggled to run between the tackles. Finding running backs that do it all in one body is awfully hard. Savion Hitter is one of those guys. We know Michigan wants to run the football. You want to have that special running back to do it with, and I think Savion Hitter, probably that guy for Michigan in the 2026 cycle. Number 2, in a surprise visit, a guy that I wish we talked about more because I didn't know he was going to be on campus until Friday afternoon, Devon Benjamin. This kid rocks. To me, this could be the next Rod Moore for Michigan. Arguably a little bit more athletic. This is a guy that could play boundary cornerback for you, could play the nickel, could play the deep third. He's a guy that has tremendous football IQ to go along with a really, really special athletic profile. All the things that we love about Rod Moore in terms of his understanding of the game and just being in the right spot at the right time and doing everything you ask him to do. I think Devon Benjamin checks all those boxes. We know Lamar Morgan prioritizes versatility in the back end. I think Michigan has some ground to make up, with programs like Oregon. This is a guy, and this is the exciting part for us Michigan fans. If Michigan wants a guy badly, you're going to see them go out and do everything they can to go out and get him. Under, Jim Harbaugh, there were times where you felt like Michigan kind of took a backseat. Said, all right, if Devon Benjamin, if USC and Oregon are going after him hard from California, we ain't going to go after him. That's not going to be the case with Sherrone Moore in Michigan. Number 3, Carrie Adams, DMV area. Look, Biff Poggi back on this staff. I think it helps you tremendously with these kids in the DMV. He's the kind of cornerback, similar to how we talked about Shamari Earls in the 2025 cycle, that we need to deal with those wide receivers from Ohio State and those wide receivers from Oregon, or a team like Texas that you might see in the college football playoffs. If you want to go win national championships, you have to have elite cornerbacks that can run with some programs that have some difference makers at wide receiver. Carrie Adams is 6'2", 180. 10-7 in the 100-meter dash, continues to get better as a football player. The best way to describe him is a box checker. He's a box checker boundary cornerback that can do anything you want. Number 4, Carter Meadows. Here's a really interesting conversation with Carter Meadows, and if Michigan fans are still listening at minute 11, would love to hear your takes. I think we all like Carter Meadows. I think we all really appreciate the upside that Carter Meadows brings to the table. Somewhere down the road, you feel like this kid is going to be a stud. My comp for him is David Ojabo, a guy that maybe not the best football player right now, but has the chance to be a first-round talent somewhere down the road. Here's the conversation with Carter Meadows. He's a very sought-after kid, right? You kind of get to feel that it will take significant resources to get Carter Meadows into your class. But on the flip side, Carter Meadows is a guy that probably won't contribute till year 3, at least in my opinion. And then has the chance of doing what David Ojabo did and say, hey, I get on the field, I dominate, I go to the NFL, you get 1 year out of him. The issue that I could see with Michigan is, hey, we're going to push in our chips to go get a guy like Carter Meadows, but we're going to be paying him a decent amount of our budget to be kind of a depth player for his first 2 years as he's still developing. And then you might only get 1 year out of him before he goes to the NFL. One of the things I look at, and I think this is why Michigan was so aggressive with a guy like Bryce Underwood, was if we're going to invest significant money towards a guy at the high school ranks, you probably want him to be you probably want some confidence that they're going to contribute early and play a decent amount as year 1, year 2, year 3 guys. I don't know if you can say that with Carter Meadows. You could say that with Shamari Earls. You could say that with a guy like Bryce Underwood. Not sure if you can say that with Carter Meadows. I'm not saying you don't go after him, because he's a guy that you give him 2 years with Lou Esposito in this strength room, say, hey, could be a really good football player. You want these kind of guys on your roster, but you also want to talk about the strategy of how you want to use your resources. I think an interesting conversation going back to the board. We'll see where Michigan goes. You got a couple of wide receivers that you like, Travis Johnson, Zion Robinson. All right, last thing I'll touch on before we get out of here. I highlighted Tristan Keys. I put an asterisk next to his name. Look, Michigan's on the outside looking in, right? He's committed to LSU. It sounds like Miami's the team that's primed to flip him. I think there was a reason that Michigan got him on campus in the spring. I think Michigan's looking to make a splash with a difference maker at wide receiver. And again, that has the ability to come in early and be a difference maker. If there was one guy that kind of followed that same, Ty Haywood, Bryce Underwood, because, Michigan wasn't going after Ty Haywood until late in that process. Michigan and Bryce Underwood was not a thing until October, November. If there's a guy that I feel like might be that scenario in this 2026 cycle, I think it could be 5-star wide receiver Tristan Keys from Mississippi. That's me just calling my shot. Love the kid. Would be fired up if he comes to Michigan. Hey, who do we have to add to this list? Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.